It is my pleasure to welcome Donnie Campbell, a good friend. He's an endurance mountain athlete and running coach. Look, Donnie's based in the Highlands. He's record holder for a complete round of all 282. You'll correct me on that one, Donnie. Scottish Munros in a self-propelled style. So run and walk pretty fast, cycle, kayak. He's broken the record by over a week, completed in 31 days, 23 hours. So here's Donnie, main sport, ultra mountain running, run races all over the world and won races all over the world. Represented Team GB at the World Trail Running Championships. You've run across the Namib Desert in 9 days. Look, you're in the Scottish Highlands. It's perfect training ground for running. And when you're not running, you're helping others, you're coaching others to achieve their goals in ultra running and other kinds of running. Donnie, you sound like a pretty busy man. And I know I was trying to get hold of you yesterday and you messaged me saying, no, not today, I'll contact you tomorrow morning. And I found out exactly why you couldn't message me. So let's start there. The weekend just gone. Just tell us what you were up to.
Cool. So we'll jump back. So obviously still on COVID lockdown. I was looking for something at the start of the year to kind of motivate me in training. So I decided to run the Cape Raft trail, which is a long distance trail from Fort William to Cape Raft. It's about 200 plus miles. Reason being, I've always wanted to go to Cape Raft. And then, during training, I picked up a running injury, so it limited my running. So on the hoof, about 4 weeks ago, I decided that I would cycle a different trail that started in Glasgow to Cape Raft. So I'm still achieving my objective of going visiting Cape Raft on that. So I was planning to start that at the weekend, which I did on Saturday night at 8:30. And I made it 6 kilometers into my cycle on Saturday night and I had a bike failure. So that ruled that one out. And then managed to get my bike fixed on Sunday morning, and I decided there was another trail that started in Glasgow and finished at my home in Inverness. It just made logical sense that I would just cycle home along what's an off-road bike trail called the Badgers Divide.
What logical sense? Well, I guess there's a teeny amount of people that would think that's logical sense, don't it? But carry on, sorry.
Well, it's logical because I always wanted to do it, and I was in the situation where I was in Glasgow, I had my bike, but what I forgot at the time was actually the weather was turning really bad. And the reason I started my cycle to Cape Raft on the Saturday evening was to avoid the worst weather. So, I regretted that decision after 4 hours of torrential rain and being miserable. But I made it back to Inverness at 8 a.m. on Monday morning after cycling through the night in torrential rain. And Lance text messaged me and I was a bit like, I'll get onto that tomorrow. My brain wasn't fully functional again by that point.
Brilliant. Look, Donnie, already, a couple of minutes in and people will be thinking on the podcast, we've just got a nutter here. And on one hand, they'd be right. On the other hand, of course, you're a very sensible, well thought through kind of guy. Take it back to the beginning for us. Have you always had this kind of inclination for adventure and kind of being a nutter and trying to go for it? Or take us right back to school, if you would, Donnie, where you grew up and what it was like at school. Were you always for the outdoors and adventure?
Cool. So I grew up in Isle of Skye, so obviously west coast of Scotland, very remote. So I was always competitive. So basically, growing up, I was into sports. I played football and shinty. Shinty was my first sport. And for those people that don't know what shinty is, it's a bit like Irish hurling. Just Google it. There's loads of YouTube videos of shinty. So I played that to quite a high level during school. Made it up to under 17 Scotland level, and then I joined the Marines from school. I've always had that kind of competitive drive. I always liked adventure. I always liked going for a big bike ride as a kid, or going into the hills and doing some hill climbing. Obviously, the Coolins on the back doorstep. So I've always been into the outdoors and always kind of want to do well at the things I want to do well at, and have that kind of motivation and competitive drive to train for it.
Yeah, really good. You mentioned there just all the outdoors and growing up in the Coolins, getting up into the mountains and bike rides. Was it that made you think seriously about then going into the Marines, just kind of pushing yourself and testing yourself to the very core of who you are? Help us understand that decision making around potential career of going for the Marines.
If I'm honest, it was probably the path of least resistance. So how I fell into the Marines is, I remember at school, I went to the careers advisor and I went, okay, I either want to go and study sports coaching and development because I was always sporty, or join the Marines and like challenge yourself that way, travel the world and see the world. And she's like, give me loads of information on university. And she said, closest careers office in Inverness, in Skye, was Inverness. So it's about 2.5 hour drive. So like, go through, see them. So I went through, completely naive, thought I was getting information. And they said, oh, you're here, you might as well do a written test. So I did a written test. And then they're like, do you want to go in as a Marine or as an officer? This is how clueless I was at 17. I was like, what's the difference? Basically said, the officer, you have to do more studying and you'll have to finish school. And I was like, you're actually telling me I don't have to finish school and I could just join the Marines? And that's how it kind of happened. I just, path of least resistance, I just kind of did the potential Royal Marines course, passed that, and then off to the Marines down in Limpston for 30 weeks training. So yeah, I did want that adventure. I did want to challenge myself and see how far I can physically push myself, and also that kind of adventure lifestyle. And I suppose that was the path of least resistance to that kind of lifestyle, was joining the Marines to a certain extent.
I thought about joining the Marines, Donnie, and then I woke up and realised it was just a dream. Great, Donnie. We're going to talk about ultra running in a moment, but let's talk a little bit about then your Christian faith and how it weaves together. Let's go right back to the beginning of how it started. Family back in Skye.
Cool. So we'll rewind back to growing up on Skye. So I grew up in Church of Scotland family. My dad was an elder in the Church of Scotland. It was quite conservative, so like there was no TV on a Sunday. And being Skye at the time, no shops were open on a Sunday. I remember if you wanted to go and buy the Sunday papers in Skye, you'd have to drive to Portree, which was like 16 miles away, and the news agent wasn't even open on a Sunday. They sold it in a cafe. You know, that's kind of how it was. You wouldn't hang your washing up on a Sunday. And obviously, there's some places in the west of Scotland you still probably get frowned on if you hang your washing up on a Sunday. So that's kind of my background. And at the time, like being younger and being into Shinty and that, and kind of believed it, I kind of knew there was a God or there was something bigger. But for me, it's probably quite a common story, as I didn't want to live in his terms, not realizing actually, you know, it's better that way to a certain extent. I was like, I want to do it my way. I want to go and have fun. You know, I thought it's something for when I'm older. You know, I'll come back to when I'm older. I want to go and party and do what my friends are doing, and you know, just live a lifestyle that's not following Jesus really on that. So yeah, it was that kind of got put in the back burner when I left the Marines. Kind of knew about it, but didn't go to church, didn't do anything. And same at uni, I wasn't a Christian at uni. It wasn't until after university, when I got into running, that I ended up falling back into church lifestyle. So basically left the Marines, went to uni to study sports coaching and development, and I partied a wee bit too much at uni, drank too much beer, ate too much food, put a bit of weight on. And it was when I was at home, I was working, just labouring in between a summer at uni, and one of my mates was like, oh, why don't you come and do this race on Islay Enduro? It was like a 150-mile race over 5 days. And this is how I got into ultra running. And I was like, that sounds like great. This sounds like why I joined the Marines. It's that kind of adventure lifestyle. It's like 5 days of racing over like remote West Coast Island on Islay Enduro. And it was kind of that motivation I needed to get fit to play shinty to a competitive standard, because that was what I was wanting to do at the time, was actually try and make like Scotland squad and get to that level. But so basically before that race, I was like, oh, okay, this is quite a big thing. It was actually bigger than any of my stuff I've done in the Marines. I thought, you know, bit of superstition, went to church. I was in Glasgow at the time, so I went to the Tron Church in Glasgow. And then I did the race, finished fourth, and that was probably my first running race, real running race. I finished fourth in that. And then, yeah, kind of them early years, that would have been 2009, you know, I wouldn't say I was going to church every Sunday straight away from that, but it was kind of more, I was getting more regular. It might have been once a month or once before a race or that. But then it was getting more and more and more regular. And then, yeah, I remember a point, like, must have been over, say, a couple of months or even a month. I remember that them going through Genesis at the con, and I remember we were going through Abraham's story, and it just really spoke to me. And I can't say on a specific day that's when I was definitely converted, or that was definitely when I was born again. But for me, it was like more, I wanted to make sure before I told people. So it was like, I thought I was a Christian, but I didn't want to say I was a Christian until I was 100% sure, and it wasn't just like a phase or something like that. So that's kind of how I end up finding my way back to church, finding Jesus again, finding my faith. And it's kind of interlinked with my running. So yeah.
Fascinating. Really great always to hear anyone's story on how they became a Christian. But for you, kind of the deep link between Christian faith and your desire and ability to run, kind of so interlinked. Tell us a little bit more about those first years when you worked out, actually, you not just got a passion for ultra running, but you were actually quite good at it as well. Like coming fourth when you'd not done anything really in a major ultra running race, then it sounds pretty good. Tell us about those early years and just finding your feet, and then when it dawned on you that actually this is something that you could do as a vocation, as a profession. Talk us through that, Donnie.
Cool. So obviously, first race, it wasn't overly competitive. To just be that clear, I wasn't like a superstar straight away, or I'm not even a superstar. But I finished fourth in a race. It wasn't overly competitive. Like I did a few races after that, and I was probably like maybe top 30 or something like that.
But hold on, just for the record. I mean, it's not like when you say it's not really competitive. I mean, it's not like me on the start line, just happy to be there with a rucksack full of food and going for it. Don't do yourself a disservice. It was probably a lot more competitive than that, right?
Yeah, it was a small field, like because it was such a unique kind of multi-stage race. It was a low-key race. Obviously, I went and did that. I think the following year I did like the Highland Fling, which is a race from Mulgai to Tyndrum on the first part of the West Highland Way. That's probably one of the biggest participation ultras in the UK. And I think the first year I did that, I would have been I would have to check, probably around about 30th overall. But if I can give you a comparison from that so I think my time then was maybe round about 10 hours. To then maybe, I think it was about 3 or 4 years later, I went and broke the course record and ran it in under 7 hours. So you can see from progression from when I got into running long distance, I wasn't just like really good straight away. I learned stuff. Like I look back now and realize what I did at the start was just, some of the stuff was just ridiculous. I'd never do that again.
Go on, give us one or two things, because I'd like to learn from you on this one.
Okay, so nutrition-wise, like having Nutella and toast, it's like you're an athlete and you're stuffing your face with Nutella.
It sounds quite nice.
Sometimes everything in moderation, even moderation. But so obviously nutrition, like I've adapted my nutrition over the years. That's one thing. Obviously, when you're looking at training from a scientific point of view, it's not just actually the training sessions you do, it's your nutrition, your recovery, etc., etc. Other stuff that I've done differently, types of training that I've done and stuff like that, more specific, running up and down hills. And again, training is just building blocks. So the longer you do it, generally, if you stay injury free, you just keep progressing every year. Obviously, you get to a point that the progressions get smaller and smaller as you reach your closer to your full potential.
Of course, as part of what you do, Donnie, it's not, and I guess COVID has highlighted this, where we'll talk about your Munro challenge in a little while, but it's not about you just kind of challenging yourself and going for it and trying to knock off some fastest known times. There's a competition element, of course, in this. Usually you'll be races around the world competing on the ultra running circuit. Just tell us what that looks like. What would a usual year for you look like? I know usual is a weird term now, but go back a couple of years, rewind. What would a usual year look like for you as a competitor in the elite world of ultra running?
Cool. So I would probably in a usual year maybe do 3 big races a year, target 3 A races, so maybe 1 in the spring, 1 middle of the summer, 1 autumn. If you look at true elite, so obviously if you look at the marathon, and elite Kenyans or elite East Africans, they will at maximum do 2 marathons a year because it takes that much time for them to recover. So obviously, if you want to perform your best in each race, and that's kind of what I would like the races to perform my best, then doing any more than 3, for me, I feel I don't recover in between and I can't do the training for the next race. So obviously, I might do what I class as a B races, which is a race that I don't really care about. I'm using it as preparation for my big race on that. So generally, but you get other athletes that can do like 5, 6 races a year on that. But I just kind of want to focus on 3 races. I think that's a good balance for me. And then I can give 100% in each of them races on that. But yeah, sports science wise, if you're on a 100-miler, you take a good month at least to recover from it. If it's your first 100-miler, you might take 6 months to recover from it. So yeah, from sports science, then actually you can't really keep performing at a high level and doing long distance racing, consecutive months. You're just going to end up burnt out. So you got to think about longevity as well in training. Okay,
Donnie, you're on the start line of a big race. You've worked hard, 4 months of training. Help us understand what you do. How do you prepare on the morning of or evening of or whenever the race starts? And how do you get your perspective right? And especially as a Christian, what's going through your mind in that time? Of course, there's the physical preparation, which we know is really important, but in terms of mentally, and then we'd say, spiritually, the whole mind and body and spirit working together. Help us understand what that looks like on the leading up to a start line of a big race when you put so much time and energy into getting to this point.
That's a hard question. So obviously, yeah, it depends. Like some of my races might start at midnight, 4 a.m., 6, 5 p.m. in the evening. I've done all these start times. So nutrition-wise, try and have something like 3 or 4 hours before or a couple hours before, that kind of stuff, rest going into the race. Leading into the race, you're going to be nervous. Like before an event or before something, if you care about something and want to do well at something, you're going to get nervous. But nerves is a good sign. It shows that you care. Obviously, too much nerves, then you can bottle it. But, generally a bit of nerves, if you can control the nerves, means that you're going to perform well. So accepting that. Coming onto the start line specifically, obviously you got loads of thoughts running through your head. How's your body going to feel? How am I going to perform? All the kind of sports science, but then also I like to just give thanks to God for just making it to the start line, which is the biggest challenge anyway, and just asking so I can go out and enjoy the day, really, and just enjoy his creation to a certain extent.
And look, we're in the race, and I mean, you'll be able to picture where you were at different times with that, the mental ability to overcome a situation where everything's screaming, stop, finish, you just call it a day. It just gives us an insight into what goes on for you, how you have perhaps managed your mind, how you've trained your mind, how mentally you were in the middle of that race, that tough race. How do you do that? And then how does faith ever speak into that moment of kind of utter despair when you want to throw into the towel in as well? Help us understand that, Donnie.
So probably the easiest way of understanding that is I'm quite stubborn to a certain extent. It must be like, even the weekend here is the most recent example. So cycling from Glasgow to Inverness along the Badger's Divide in torrential rain for 16 hours. I was so cold, so wet, so miserable. And like, I could have easily chuck the towel in at any point because my wife Rachel was supporting me. So I cycled 100k to Killen. It was pouring down. And in the back of my mind was, I want to stop. I might as well just stop. Like, it's not a race. I've told no one I'm doing it. I've done it on the hoof. Like, there's no reason why I need to push myself through this misery. Absolutely zilch. I could have just jumped in the car and drove home. And I was like, in Killen, I was like, okay, well, I'll put some dry clothes on, I'll put a bit more clothes on, and I'll see how I feel. And then I was like, next time I was going to see my wife Rachel was after like another 120 k's on the bike through some very remote parts of Scotland. I'm like, I was really miserable and cold and wet. And I was like, at one point where I was on a remote road near like Kinlochranach, if anyone knows Scotland, I was like, could I phone Rachel, my wife, to tell her to come and pick me up here and I could just cycle towards her? I'm absolutely, it's night's coming in, it's cold, it's dark, and like, it's pointless. I'm doing something just for me. Like, there's no race, no competitiveness. Like, I wasn't even sure what the FKT was. I'm just doing it as a challenge. And like, yeah, I just kept going. Sometimes I don't know how to stop. I just don't want to let myself stop. Like, some way I'm wired is like, yeah, I'll just keep going. Like, I got to where I met her again near Loch Laggan. It dried up for a couple of hours, so that was fine, warmed up, and then cycled again. And by the point it started raining again, I was like, well, I'm that close. I'm like another 70K from home. I might as well just keep cycling, even though I was cold, wet, miserable, and tired. You know, yeah, that's kind of the thing. I don't think, obviously, my faith comes into it, but I don't think I rationalize it in that kind of way in that situation. In some of them moments, it's more, I'll just keep going. I'll just kind of problem solve. I'll just keep working through it. Hopefully it might get better. Hopefully it might dry up. But there's races that I've stopped. Like, so, you know, in a race, it might be different. So sometimes I've DNF'd in a race, which means do not finish because the race wasn't going to plan as the way I was wanting to plan. So nutrition was off, or I was feeling nauseous, or wasn't performing the way I thought I'd perform. I might pull out for the pure reason is I don't want to jeopardize the rest of my season. And that's more of a calculated kind of athlete judgment on that. So it's not like I couldn't finish the race. I know I could physically finish that race if I wanted to. So it wasn't a physical challenge, it's more performance-wise, and I wasn't performing to my best ability. So for me, it was like, well, if I stop running now, I'll recover quicker and get back into training. So for the next race, I can potentially perform better rather than have finishing the race, not have a performance you wanted, and then taking longer to recover and longer to get back into proper training for the next race coming up. So there's different reasons on that. But when I think it's me against like that physical challenge, I just don't know how to say no, really.
Donnie, as you're in the race, do you pray?
Sometimes. So I'll tell you, so this is how my faith's kind of evolved. Like, I remember when I started running and I was an early Christian, like, I remember I would try and barter with Jesus and God. Like, I was like, okay, if I do well in this race, I'll be a better Christian. And that's looking back, that's just stupid now. But I think some athletes have been there and they're like, oh yeah, you know, if I finish in the top 10, you know, I'll go to church more. I'll try and evangelize more or something like that. But yeah, it doesn't work like that. So that's quite a few years ago when I was fairly new, you know, kind of growing in my faith. Now it's hard to say. Oh, like during the Munro run, during these big challenges, I feel I'm closer to God. Like, I feel like I've, like, for some reason he's given me a gift to be able to suffer and to a certain extent enjoy the suffering. But again, you know, it's his ability that makes me able to run up and down hills and cover the Munro. So it's kind of that thing, you know. I think one of the questions I get, you know, is do you ever get lonely when you're running up and down hills or on the Munro run? It's like, well, not really, because I enjoy my own company, and then obviously I know I'm never really alone on that. So yeah, I wouldn't say, you know, I kind of consciously pray, but I know kind of subconsciously I probably am. If that makes any sense.
It does. No, I like that. And it's great to see that kind of journey you've gone on, because you know, even now we're playing competitive sport, you barter with God, don't you? Oh Lord, if we just win this one, promise to be like X, Y, and Z in this week to follow. And we know that it's nothing to do with that. We know it's all by grace, that we're his, that we've got the gift and ability, but also we've got a relationship with him through Jesus. So you grow and understand that more, don't you? It's just great to hear that from you. Donnie, let's go to that mad challenge this summer of 2020 that you did, the Munro round, every Scottish Munro. So 282 mountains. So that's a Munro's over 3,000 feet, right? 914 meters in Scotland. You did it in 31 days, 23 hours. Look, I mean, you're pretty much on the move non-stop all the time. Take us back to the beginning. What gave you this mad idea to do such a challenge?
Laziness, probably. So, so obviously growing up in Scotland, I've always wanted to climb all the Munros in Scotland, and like some of them are really remote and boggy and very uninspiring, like rounded tops. And I like my mountains more jagged, more technical, more rocky, right underfoot. So I would just keep doing the favorite ones, or do like the really iconic ones, and like some of the ones I had no real motivation to go and do, because they weren't great for training, because they're really boggy and wet underfoot, so you can't really run them. They're really remote. So yeah, number of reasons. So I thought, why don't I just do them all in one go and get them over and done with to a certain extent? And I had that on my mind for quite a few years. And the more I researched it, I looked at like the first Munro round and how it's developed and how people have tackled it. So obviously there's some people that have like climbed all Munros, driven in between. There's some people that have ran them all and ran in between. And then there's some people that have ran them and then cycled or self-propelled in between. And that's kind of like the last two records that were set doing the Munro round was Donnie Campbell, who ran, cycled and swam between Mull and the mainland. And then the record that I broke was Stephen Pikes' record, which was set in 2010. And he had cycled and kayak. So I was like, okay, well, that seemed acceptable, logical progress for doing a Munro round. And obviously people ask, why didn't you just run in between them? It's like, well, it's a lot of running like up and down the side of the A9 and stuff. And I don't find flat running that interesting. I can do it, but you know, the bike was more efficient at covering that type of terrain, so you could get to the hillier stuff. So yeah, that's how it came about. And actually it was in 2019 I'd committed. So before even COVID had came along, in the summer of 2019, when the world was still normal and no one had ever heard of COVID, I was like, okay, I'm going to take a year off racing, because that's what it's going to take to train for it, complete it and recover from it. So I was like, I'm going to take a year of racing in 2020, and I am going to do this Munro round self-propelled style. So that's how the planning came about.
Wow. Okay. So last summer, look, for the record, I joined you for a Munro, right?
Yeah.
Me and my wife, we're in the Cairngorms, we're on holiday up in Scotland, seeing family, and busy texting you, and I know you were busy, and whenever you had a moment to text, then you just wanted to sleep as well. So I just tried to hook up with you. You're very kind. So we got to run with you. No, I know we didn't run. We walked with you, and you were desperate to run, Donnie. And we did one Munro out of the 282. I remember sitting on top of the Munro with my wife, watching you run off into the distance to complete maybe 14 more on that day. And we sat there for 20 minutes thinking, oh my, we were just trying to get our heads around the achievement or the adventure, the challenge that it was. It's mad challenge. What, 1,422 kilometers you were running, walking, essentially. Just give us a taste for those listening who can't even begin to picture what the Munros in Scotland look like, but give us a taste of that 30 days, that kind of the highlights and the lowlights of what it was, the whole month of August, wasn't it?
So a typical day would involve me alarm clock at 5 a.m. in the morning. I was staying in a motorhome, so my wife was my sport crew. So it was a team effort. Like without her, I'd be still stuck on the Mull, which was the first Munro. So again, a massive team effort. So basically, my typical days would be like 5 a.m. alarm clock, breakfast, which would be like 3 or 4 slices of toast with almond butter and blueberry jam, and then I was out the door for 6 a.m. running. Most days were averaging about 12 hours a day between running and cycling. Probably about 80% of it was like running up and down, climbing hills, limping, crawling, whatever it took to get to the top of the hill. Obviously, some days were longer and other days were shorter, just the way the Munros are spread out. So, for example, you wouldn't start a ridge and then come off it halfway through to go back up onto the ridge the second day, because that's going to give you more distance, more elevation. So it's like doing it the most efficient way. And that went into the planning to find out, how much could I do in one day and try and be efficient on doing the Munro, so you're never covering more ground than you have to on that. So an average, the other average would be about 8 hours sleep a night. So the first week was fine to a certain extent, fairly new, everything going well. Picked up an injury when I was running with you. So I was limping a fair bit, and that was really.
Is that my fault?
No, that wasn't your fault. It was the day before. I was like, it started to come on. So that was like a tendinopathy of a tendon in the ankle on the right side. And that was actually excruciating. So once I had left you that day, it was probably one of the most painful descents I had off Ben Ann, which is in the Eastern Cairngorms. That was the last Munro of that day. Like, it was completely agony on that. And then kind of that from there on, it was kind of like managing that to a certain extent. And then I got into the central belt, so like round Tyndrum area, Ben Lomond. And that was when I knew I was going to get to Groundhog Day. So with these challenges, like when you're at the start, it's all fairly new, you're excited, you're motivated. When you're getting close to the end, you can see the end in sight, you're motivated because you know you're nearly done. Then you get the middle, which is probably mentally the challenge bit, because you're so far from the start and so far to the finish. And I knew that was going to be the toughest bit mentally, because it's like Groundhog Day. It's just like so many big days that you can't see the end. And I did have like a moment where I had a breakdown. So I was filming it for the BBC Adventure Show, and the cameraman said to me at the time when he was giving me some cameras to record myself, he was like, one bit of advice, what makes great TV is at your very lowest, at your very worst moment, when you don't want to do anything, you don't want to take the camera out, just take the camera out and start speaking to it. And that's what happened. So like on day 17 started off quite nice. Like I was on Ben Cruachan, which is a Munro near Oban, really nice sunrise, beautiful. But by halfway through the day, my left ankle started getting sore. So basically I was managing my right ankle, which was right anterior tibial tendinopathy. And the same thing started going on my left, but it got really sore straight away on my left. So basically from having one good ankle, now I had two bad ankles. And all I could see was like the amount of pain I went through on my right side to try and get more bearable. Like all I could see was that like another week of severe pain. And I had big days coming up and I'd lost focus. It was like big day after big day. There's no end in sight. And I remember coming over the second last Munro and like looking down, thinking it'd just be a wee descent up to last Munro and then back to the van and I could regroup. And it was like a massive descent, so descending like 500 meters and then back up. And I was lost it. I was like crying to the phone saying, I'm not enjoying myself. What's the point of running up and down Munros? And there's like zero real point of running up and down Munros still. Like it's fun, but there's no real point to it to a certain extent. So yeah, that was kind of like the lowest point. And people ask, you know, how do you get through them low points and stuff? And it's not like there's one thing. So, you know, one thing that helped was that was routine. So my routine in August was alarm clock at 5 a.m, out the door running by 6. So that's what happened on day 18. But I got home, well, I got back to the van on day 17. And I said it on social media. I said to my wife, I was honest, like, I'm not enjoying it. I could just go home. I've had enough, this, that. And that was never like I was going to follow through. By that point, I was already, I think, 3 days up on the record. So I literally stayed in that car park for 3 days, rested, recovered, and carried on and still broke the record. But it was just me being honest and just getting off my chest that I wasn't enjoying that point. But then day 18, it's like, okay, well, I'll just get up and go again. That was routine on that. And then obviously we've chatted about, you know, how do I get through these? Why don't I just stop? And I just find it hard. Like, I don't know when I'm wanting to push myself that physically hard. I don't know when to say, okay, enough's enough. I can't keep going. I just keep going.
That, I mean, yeah, incredible. Donnie, look, let's pull this round. Future for you, can you see competitions coming back? Are they on the horizon? And tell me what that looks like for you in the next year.
It's hard to say. Like, obviously there's races starting to come back, and this year at the start of the year I was really motivated to race, but now I'm like a bit more like relaxed about it. I'm like, I don't know if I'll race this year, and if there's races on, I just enjoy being out in the hills, or just enjoying like being out in the God's creation. It's just really nice. Love training on that. Yeah, and I'm probably a bit more content now, like, because I've done so much racing wise, and I've been so grateful that, you know, I've had these experiences. You know, I've been successful, I've always been unsuccessful as well. So, you know, yeah, I'm just actually at the point of my career where it's like I'm just thankful for the experience I've had and stuff I've been able to achieve. And yeah, so racing again, yes, I would like to. When will that happen? Maybe this year, maybe next year. We'll just have to wait and see.
So, as we know, you're on your own in that elite world of running as a Christian, trying to represent the Lord Jesus, but enjoy every good gift that he gives you. And as you said, I don't think I've heard that many times before. I think he's given me the gift to suffer well. That's incredible, Donnie. And I don't think I'll hear it again from many athletes and players around the world. Donnie, look, it's been a joy to talk to you. We meet every month to read the Bible together. So for me, we've just moved outside of the Bible and talked about life, and it's been super insightful to hear, and really encouraging to hear your story and how you connect your sport and faith together. So thank you very much, sir. Hope you listening on the podcast have enjoyed this as well. It's been a real pleasure. Donnie Campbell, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. Thanks. Have a good day.